So you should have a sheet of paper out, labeled equations of perpendicular bisectors, and then you write the two problems directly under it. So your two inequalities and their graphs. These two types of problems are on the PERT test. I know especially the second one is. It's on the review guide, and I have had students come back and tell me about it. This first one is a different version. Bless you. A different version of number 2. We're going to do it anyways. Yes, dear. As much as it'll take you to solve each equation. This one won't take very many. All right, so in the directions, if you look, it says solve each compound inequality and graph its solution. What is the weird word you see in that sentence?
Compound.
Compound. So compound means the same thing like in English. What are some compound words you know? Okay, pick a rated G version, buddy.
That is rated G.
And that was PG.
Baseball bat.
Those are 2 words. Baseball is a compound word. What did you say? Dog pound?
Compound.
Those are 2 words.
It's a compound word.
Compound is not. Compound means that it's one word that can be broken up into 2 words. Compound is not.
Yeah, pound cake.
Basketball is good.
I said hamster ball.
What did you say?
I said hamster ball.
Rice.
Here we go. So, in number 1, what kind of sticks out to you about this problem? What is?
It says or.
It says or.
There's letters.
There are letters, but there's the word or. So this means there's 2 different problems, so you need to separate them. So take the first one, which is m minus 2 is less than negative 8. And the second one will be m over 8 is greater than 1. We will solve them individually, graph them together. In my blue equation, m minus 2 is less than negative 8. What do I do to solve?
Add that to.
Add 2. So m is less than negative 6. So that's part of my answer. Am I going to have an open or closed dot?
Open.
Open, and then I'll show you to the
Left.
left. My second equation, what's happening to the letter m?
Is divided.
It's being divided by 8. What's the opposite of dividing by 8? Multiplying by 8. So then m is greater than 8. Open or closed circle? Open, and then shade to the right. Ta-da! 2 answers. In number 2, this one looks especially different. I actually really like these. I know I'm a math teacher, but I like them. So if you look, it looks really hard because there's 2 inequalities. So if it helps, ignore one of them for now. If you just had what's written in purple, how would you solve for n? You would subtract 9. So you will do that, except for you can't just subtract it from the left and the middle. You subtract it also from the right side. Then you bring all of them down. What's minus 1 minus 9? Negative 10. All right, and then 9 minus 9 is 0, so we'll just have n. And then the last 17 minus 9, which is 8. You're good. So this is our answer. So we're going to put dots at negative 10. Is this dot going to be open or closed? Going to be open. All right, and then we're going to put a dot at 8. Open or closed? Open. Think about this. N is directly between negative 10 and 8, right? Visually, we all see it's between. So where do you think we will shade?
To the left.
Between. 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 You can clearly see n is less than 8. You could have rearranged this to be n is greater than negative 10, so in which it would have to fit between those 2. All right, we're going to put away that paper for now. Go back to the notes for today. Where does this go? It's going to be at notes behind the ones for today. But we are going to go back to it, so we're not done with it. All right, so your review sections, 3 of them will be due on Friday when you take your quiz. I will show you. You have both of them, please. Well, yeah. So this is tomorrow, so you'll get this tomorrow. This is for today, and the review section from yesterday will also be due. There's only 4 on today. I think there was 4 or 6, I don't remember. Yesterday. 8 on yesterday? 6 on yesterday. Yeah. Well, either way, there's 6 of them. So you'll see. They're due on Friday. What else is on Friday?
The quiz.
The quiz. Your homework is on the screen. It's also on the board. It's also on InfoDirect. No.
What else is it?
What is it called?
Plus.
Rediker Plus Portal, whatever it is.
called-
Anyways, at the end of the lesson, it'll pop up again. Okay? So we're going to go to our notes. If you look at the notes at the top of them, you can cross out the top 4 because we have already done them. So the top 4 problems, you did them yesterday. So these 4 we've already done. You can cross them out. You don't have to, but we've already done them. That's why we're skipping them. All right? So we're going to talk about at the bottom, we're going to talk about the words perpendicular and bisector. They're not on the screen yet. What does the word perpendicular mean? That's their slopes. Yeah, 2 things that intersect and form a 90-degree angle. So we're on this paper. They intersect and form a 90-degree angle. So you want to be writing that down in the section where it says perpendicular. So you're writing it down right here. Intersect and form 90 degrees. Thank you. So intersect and form 90 degrees. We're just breaking down what perpendicular bisectors are. Okay, so my 2 lines in my picture, AB and CP, intersect and form 90. What does the word bisector mean? Cut something into half. Cut something into 2 congruent parts. That is the second word, bisector. Cut something into 2 congruent parts. I'll take it away, so do what we're supposed to be doing. Cut something into 2 congruent parts. All right, so let's look. You learned in 3.4 that a perpendicular bisector, I saw a lot of you highlight this, which is great. You want to highlight the rest. Perpendicular bisector of a line is the line that is perpendicular to the segment at its midpoint. What is the midpoint of this picture that I have on the screen? P is my midpoint. How do I know that it's in the center, other than it looks like it's in the center? What tells me that it is in the direct center? The what? The dot, no. That tells me that they form a right angle. I wrote that. How would I know that something's in the middle?
Because they're congruent.
Because these portions are congruent, yeah. So if the left half is congruent to the right half, that means this point is directly in the center. Can we, in geometry, just say, well, it looks like it's in the middle? No. Okay, you need those tick marks. All right, so the last thing, and we talked about it yesterday, what does equidistant sound like? Equal distance, so it means like the same distance, obviously. We're going to flip to the next page. We're going to talk about perpendicular bisectors and angle bisectors. We're actually going to dumb this down a lot. On your test or quiz, it's not going to tell you if it's a perpendicular or an angle bisector. So here are 2 examples. We're going to break it down. What do they look like? How are they different? What do we look for? Okay. First off, how do they look different? What is perpendicular? What did you say? One is closed, one is open. That's cool. You can write that down. What does this look like, this shape?
Triangle.
Looks like a triangle. So perpendicular bisector really looks like a triangle. What does an angle bisector look like?
Diamond.
A diamond. Square is fine. A diamond, square, whatever. Okay, one of them is open. We could say this one is open. This one looks closed. What else do we notice the difference of? What'd you say? Okay. So the line, the bisector, goes through on both ends. Both ends. My bisector is this line. I agree. Whereas this one stops. All right, let's look at how many right angles there are. How many right angles are in this picture? Like depicted for you. Well, there's one. So there's one right angle. I know technically that there's two, but I'm just asking what they gave you. Technically, this is a right angle as well, but they only drew one. How many are drawn in this picture? Two right angles. This picture has no angles besides 90. Like, we're not told the measure of angle Q, the measure of angle R, the measure of angle S, none of that. Whereas on the other picture, other than 90, how many angles are mentioned? One angle. An angle is mentioned. And I'm not talking about the right angles. Okay, so keep those in mind. But the properties you learned for angle bisector will actually apply to perpendicular bisector. We learned that angle bisector, the distance from any point to the angle was congruent. And then the angles will be congruent. You're actually going to learn the same thing. If you see point S is on the bisector, it's going to be congruent SP and SR. So it's going to be the same thing. All right? So let's look at our theorem. It's on the bottom. You want to take your highlighter. All right, we can take our highlighter. Go ahead and highlight the bisectors. These are our bisectors. If a point lies on the perpendicular bisector of a segment, then it is equidistant from the endpoints of the segment. So what is the point it's talking about on my bisector? Point C. So it's saying point C is going to be equidistant to the endpoints. What are the endpoints? A and B. So it means AC is going to be congruent to CB. Okay, so you want to write that these two lines will be congruent, not lines, but the two distances will be congruent. And then the converse is true as well. And then we're going to flip. That was it on that. On our first example, we're trying to find the length of CD. What is CD going to be congruent with? AD. So what's the measure of CD? 27. That's it. You can, you don't have to. If it would help you look back at your notes. We're trying to find the length of GH. What is GH going to be congruent with? EH. So what can I do with them if they're congruent? Set them equal. This is where a lot of people make an algebraic error. What's my smaller x? 2x. If I move 2x, that's fine. But what is 2x minus 2x? Nothing. What represents nothing? 0. Big red 0. A lot of people forget the equal sign. But you can't. 0 equals. What's 3x minus 2x? X. And then minus 8. All right, what do we do next? Add 8. So x equals 8. Is that what it asked for me to find? Nope. We plug it back in for GH. Currently, GH is 3 times x minus 8. What's 3 times 8? 24. So we'll have 24 minus 8, which is 16. Is there a way I can check it? Yes, I can plug it back in. 2 times 8, which is 16. All right, you guys are going to do the bottom section. I'll walk around and check. All right, if YZ is 13.7, what's the measure of WZ? 13.7, good. Oh, sorry, 0.75. It says if we're trying to find YZ, WY is, no, sorry. WZ is 4n minus 13, and YZ is n plus 17. What do we know about WZ and ZY? They're equal, so we could set them equal. So what do we get for n? 10. Good. Is that my final answer? No, I have YZ is equal to n plus 17. So if I know n is 10, that means YZ will be equal to 10 plus 17 is 27. Good. All right, and then our last problem, it said that find WX if WY was equal to, WZ is 20.5, WY is 14.8, and then YZ is also 20.5. All right, so which one of these numbers will help me solve what WX is? 14.8. 14.8 is the length of the entire side. If ZX is my bisector, that means it cuts this entire side in half. How do I cut 14.8 in half? Divide by 2. So 7. You're good. 7.4 and 7.4. So that'd be my final answer. Good. Go ahead and take back out that sheet of paper. We're going to talk about the last aspect of the lesson. So you will have a quiz over this on Friday, and solely this. So you're going to have a two-part quiz. The first part quiz you will have over the review sections. The second part, you'll have a few of these problems to do. Here's what I want to tell you. If you have a negative mind, you will have a negative life. Do you agree? I think so. If you're negative about everything in life, it won't be very positive. So in this section, I give you 5 steps. It's realistically 4 steps. All 4 steps you have done before in this class in algebra, in pre-algebra. Okay, so it will be okay if you follow along. Okay, so on that sheet of paper, you'll want to write down, writing an equation for a bisector. I'm going to show you 5 steps. 5 steps to find the equation for a bisector. So 5 steps. So there are 2 important things about perpendicular bisectors. They're perpendicular at a line's midpoint. So the 2 important parts are perpendicular and at a midpoint. So what do you think is important to find for a perpendicular bisector if it is perpendicular at a midpoint? I did have a student earlier say this. What do we think we need to find? We currently have a line, -2, 1, 2, 3. Here's P, 3, 4. We currently have this line. We want to find the perpendicular bisector. Where does a perpendicular bisector cut through another line? At the midpoint. So what do you think is important to find? The midpoint. So step 1 is actually find the midpoint. Step 1, find the midpoint. If you don't remember the midpoint formula, I can write it down. y, oops, sorry, nope. Does anybody remember the midpoint formula? You add the x's, divide by 2. So is that new information, this midpoint formula? No. You don't have to graph it. I showed you the graph to show what we were doing. So we will need the midpoint. So step 1, find the midpoint. When I hit next, the formula is going to go away. All right, then we need a perpendicular line. What do you know about the graphs of perpendicular lines?
Add up to 90.
They do not. They're graph. Nope. You did a project on this.
Oh, it's
You got this. Yeah, that's right.
whatchamacallit?
It's the
That.
opposite reciprocal. But how are we going to find the opposite reciprocal of a new slope if we don't know what this slope is? So step 2 is going to be find the slope of our current points. You have also done this. y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. Do you know both those formulas by heart? Okay. This one? The slope formula? You'll find the slope of the old points. How will the old slope help me? I can find the perpendicular slope. Okay, so the next step would be find the perpendicular slope. And what do we know about perpendicular slopes? She just said them. They're opposite reciprocals. Okay, opposite sign and the reciprocal. Step 4 is to plug in the midpoint and perpendicular slope into the point slope formula, which you have also used before, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Have we used this formula before? Yes, we have. And the last step usually comes natural. What do we usually like our equation of a line to look like? It's called slope-intercept. What does that look like? She's saying it. Just say it louder. That's all. A lot of you are saying it. It's y equals mx plus b. I know, but you're like mumbling. I'm recording. The viewers at home can't hear you. It's all good. So solve for y equals mx plus b. If you follow these 5 steps, you will be just fine. Every step in itself is very simple. You just have to follow the steps. If you did not finish writing it, it is on the left side of the screen. So if you got lost at any point. So we're going to use these 2 points. Again, we have -2 up 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's my current line. All right, so if I'm trying to find the bisector, step 1, I always write the steps so that I don't get lost in the page, is to find the midpoint. So I'm going to write my midpoint formula. All right, what are my 2 x's? -2 and 4, correct. So I'm going to plug those in, -2 plus 4. So we're solving this problem together. All right, and then what are my 2 y's? 3 and 1, so 3 plus 1. All right, what is -2 plus 4? +2. What's 3 plus 1? 4. All right, so so then what's 2 divided by 2? 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So what I tell a lot of people, because we're going to use this later, I put a star next to it. Oh, that's an ugly one. But we're going to use it later in step 4 when we plug in the midpoints. So you don't want to lose it. Some people highlight it. Some people underline it. However you want to help yourself find it again later. All right, what does step 2 say to do? Find the slope of my current points. So y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. All right, what is my first y? Do we all agree? It's 3. My first y is 3. What is my second y? 1. So I plugged in my y's. What is my first x? -2. And my second x? 4. All right, 3 minus 1 is 2. Minus 2 minus 4 is -6. Do we believe in reducing? We sure do. What is 2 over -6 reduced to? -1/3, yep. All right, what does step 3 tell us to do? Find the perpendicular slope. The perpendicular is opposite sign and the reciprocal. So my current slope is -1/3. So my new one will be the opposite sign. So what's opposite of negative? Positive. And then the reciprocal of 1/3, which is 3. So we're going to use this. This is my perpendicular slope, which I also plug in my next step. Do we have any questions up until now? We found a midpoint, we found the original slope, we found the perpendicular slope. All right, I'm just going to write my point slope formula. All right, so where do I get my x1 and y1 from? My midpoint. So it says plug in the midpoint. This will help me find the equation of my bisector. So I need to use my midpoint. So what is the y of my midpoint? 2. So my y, my midpoint, comes from up here. All right, my slope, I'm just going in order. What is my perpendicular slope? 3. Right here. And then my x of my midpoint would be 1, which came from up here. That's why I tell you to put a star next to it or box it or something. It's not your final answer, but it will help you. Once you get to this step, our last step comes naturally. We want to solve for y equals mx plus b. So what do we do first? Distribute. So we will get 3x minus 3. All right, and then what will we do next? Add 2. I know I ran out of room, but it'll be over here. Y equals 3x minus 1. That is the final answer. I'll show you what that looks like on the graph. Up 3 over 1, up 3. It looks like this. Now, does this center point where they connect, does that look like the midpoint of PQ? Looks pretty dang close. All right, and then they form a right angle together. All right, so individually, were each step hard? Not really. I know all together it looks super overwhelming, but what do you think helps solving this problem, Justin? What would help solving this problem? What? What do you think? You just tell me what you think. You're mumbling. Anybody? What helps solving this problem? Breaking it up into steps, graphing it, anything like that. right, we're going to do one more together. We don't have to graph this. Go ahead and write this down. You guys are going to find step 1. All right, what did we find as our midpoint?
8.
What is it? 8-1? 8-2. Do we all agree? 8-2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are my two x's? 5 plus negative 11. What are my two y's? Negative 1 plus 3. So 5 plus negative 11 is negative 6. Minus 1 plus 3 is 2. So we should get negative 3, comma 2. Step 2 is find the slope. Go ahead and start finding the slope. It is 1. Everyone makes mistakes. In college, if your professor makes a mathematical error, usually you get bonus points for pointing them out because it means you're paying attention. As long as you're respectful. You know you cannot usually yell at them. What is my first x? Sorry, what is my first y? I always do that. First y is negative 1. What's my second y? 3. So that was my y1 and y2. What's my first x? 5. And then my second x, negative 11. All right, so minus 1 minus 3 is negative 4. 5 minus minus, what happens there? Plus. So 5 plus 11 is? Can this reduce? Yep, negative 1/4. Step 3 would be find the perpendicular slope. What is perpendicular to negative 1/4? 4, yeah. So opposite sign would be positive, and then flip it would be 4. So we're going to use 4, and we'll use our midpoint from the first step. All right, so what is the y from my midpoint? My midpoint is up here. 1. I'm going to plug in a 1 for the y. What is my perpendicular slope? That's what? It's 4, yeah. And then my x from my midpoint would be, negative 3. That negative negative will make a positive. All right, so then step 5 you do kind of on your own. You distribute, so you get 4x plus 12. Add 1. So what's my final answer? Plus 13. So the main thing is to follow the steps. Realistically, it's 4 steps. The 5th one, you put in y equals mx plus b. Usually you do that all on your own anyways. Are there any questions? Okay. Your homework is up here. You can take a picture on your way out or write it down. It doesn't matter to me.